it was a tough trial for my mom. She had never run for office before she won. She got elected to the school board, and then she found out that there was violations of some transparency laws, and ended up being a whistleblower and received death threats for it. And that really unsettled me as a kid. I was like, oh gosh, my mom did this thing, and then it was kind of the scary moment of like, why are people doing this, and why are people so angry? But I also think in that moment I learned that we need to elect leaders like my mom who are courageous, who do the right thing, even when the right thing is unpopular in the group that you're in. So that kind of set me off into politics. And then I was involved ever since. I studied it at Northwestern. I ended up loving it so much I wanted to do research. So I went to the University of Chicago. And along the way, of course, I was involved in various efforts. I helped bring the Results chapter to Chicago, which is a national group that works on strengthening your social safety net. I got very involved in organizing on the North Side around what was called CPAC at the time, the Civilian Police Accountability Council Ordinance, which was meant to create civilian and community control of police. And I really threw myself into that. I started organizing with a group of other folks on the North Side. We were doing great work. We were sitting on street corners. We were making phone calls at night, talking to people about it. And then it became clear we needed a larger coalition if we were going to pass something. And I served in negotiations that fused CPAC and the alternative, GAPA, in case people are interested. And that created the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Ordinance, which we moved through City Council together and passed a historic civilian oversight bill, which now this election, folks, for the first time, will be able to elect police counselors who are supposed to mediate and work alongside police leadership to make sure that everything's being run by the books, and that when community members have interests or want more information, that they're able to get that. I support UChicago Crime Lab. They have a great report out on workforce allocation in the police department. And I think we have to be smarter, too, about how we use the officers that we have. And I support that model. I think, reallocating to make sure that we have officers in the places where they're needed most. That's another huge problem with the city right now, is we have a lot of officers in places where they're not actually needed as much. And what I mean by that is violent crime is not as high. And then places where there is a lot of violent crime, there are fewer officers. So I support the reallocation project. I think, obviously people always ask mental health care. Yes, of course, everyone should have access to mental health care. That includes police officers, especially someone who is walking around with a weapon in their hand. They need to make sure that they're getting the proper mental health care checks and access. I think that that's paramount. I think the CTA needs to address staffing shortages head on. And that means we need to have a city council that is going to exercise oversight of the CTA. I think now that things have gotten bad, there's a really deep interest in oversight, but, we need to be having regular meetings with CTA officials, holding them accountable to maintain staffing levels, explain what they're doing to maintain staffing levels, and make sure that they actually have a program or plan in place. President Dorval Carter, for almost a year was refusing to show up at hearings and finally did. But I think that refusal to be accountable to the city suggests that, we need to find better leadership. And then to get to the other part of the question, I think in the long term, we need to encourage ridership. And so I advocate for a targeted free rider pilot, which is similar to the one that Boston did recently after the pandemic. I think that that's a great way to get folks, especially young folks and seniors, back onto the CTA. I also think if we want folks to take the CTA, we've got to make sure it's a more efficient form of transit than car. Right now, it takes over an hour to travel from Edgewater to Logan Square. But in the car, that trip's 75% faster. And so we have to do better on that front, using bus rapid transit routes as a more cost-effective and reliable way to get folks around when they're not taking trains. Increased density, especially around transit. We have this new connected communities ordinance. I think really being honest with folks and saying, listen, given the kind of place that we're going in Chicago, there's going to be more density too built around here. And that's going to also make this a more exciting place to have your store. I also want to establish a diverse zoning committee that's made up of folks who own property, who are renters. They live on the south end, the north end, the east end, the west end of the neighborhood. And they will be in charge of holding community meetings, and new developments, especially developments that require zoning changes, I'll hold developers accountable to flyer nearby neighborhoods so that folks know when those meetings are. The mayor's turned her back on Bring Chicago Home, and we have a city council who won't even show up to meetings to discuss the proposal. I think that that's unacceptable. I think homelessness is a critical citywide issue, and unhoused neighbors should not be used as pawns in a political game. We have when developers put in large developments in the port, we have to insist that affordable units are built on site, that there's no in lieu of fees paid to the city. We need to press to make sure that those affordable units include family size and affordable units, especially when they're near transit. And I also think we need to expand the ADU pilot, the accessory dwelling units pilot, which right now we have quite a bit of the 48th Ward is covered by it, but we need to make that permanent, and we need to make it citywide, because we need to allow landowners to convert garages, basements, coach houses, etc., into livable units that are up to code.